thank you all for making the effort to be here this morning. The crowd is overflowing. We had to bring in additional chairs, which is extraordinary. It tells you an awful lot about our guest speaker here this morning, the respect that people have, and they want to hear his views. So I just want to begin by thanking our sponsor here today for the breakfast, is that Citizens Bank. Many of us appreciate not only their support of the breakfast, but the support throughout the years that Citizen has been a member of the New England Council. And I know that we all would agree that Citizen is just an integral part of the community. When we think of all the worthy charities and events that are going on to make this community a better place, Citizens is high on the list of being a player, and they want to contribute. And that's what makes Citizens very unique. And we're blessed to have them as a member. We're blessed to have Ken Robinson on our board. So we just want to say thank you to them once again for stepping up to the plate. Needless to say, 2025 has started very busy again for the New England Council. These events we conduct throughout New England. We average between 50 to 55 of these events throughout all 6 New England states and in Washington. And we do the events with members of Congress, members of the United States Senate, the 6 New England governors, and then other leaders in Washington beyond New England that speak to our members. So it's an extraordinary list of activities that the New England Council has and continues to have. And I'll give you just a snapshot of what we're doing in just in the next couple of weeks. Senator Angus King of Maine will be having an event just like this. Senator Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire will be having a breakfast with her. And then we'll be back to Hartford, Connecticut, and we'll have an event in Connecticut with Congressman Joe Courtney. And we have another event here, March 24th, with the senior senator, Jack Reed, will be speaking to the New England Council. Congressman Richie Neal will be speaking to the New England Council later in the spring. So the list is going to be coming out very shortly of all the events that are coming up. We're also opening our registration for 2025 Washington Conference. Many of you have participated in the past. It's a 2-day, basically a seminar and education of what is going on in Washington. We bring people together from both sides of the aisle. We bring people from the media. We bring people from the executive branch, the legislative branch, and it's a wonderful opportunity to learn more of what is going on in Washington, as well as to meet so many of the members of Congress and the members of the United States Senate. We have an event in the dinner reception. We have a breakfast. I think you'd be very impressed again with the lineup of the speakers that we have. And again, it's a bipartisan, which is now more important than ever, to be able to have people from both sides of the aisle sit at the table and try to find common ground. So we're very proud of that, to say the least. We're also very proud to be able to say that even though I may look centennial, we're celebrating our 100th anniversary. I know Danny Egan thinks I look, like the 100-year-old centennial leader of the New England Council. But we're so proud to be able to say that we are the oldest regional business organization in the United States. And so it's a wonderful organization, to say the least. And again, it's more important now that we exist because we're able to bring people together from both parties and just to have dialogue and to respect each other. And we've done it for 100 years, and obviously it's worked. So to all of you who are members of the New England Council, I say thank you, thank you. But what we have planned in the next couple of months is the announcement of a New England Council Fellows Program. We're going to be selecting young people from each of the 6 New England states to work this summer in a non-profit environment, hopefully to learn more about that industry and that company. But we're very excited to be able to announce very shortly the selection of the candidates that have been chosen to be the inaugural recipients of the New England Council Fellows. And again, we thank the New England Council for supporting that initiative. And what we'll be doing is we'll be going to each New England state to announce the celebration of this extraordinary achievement of the centennial. And March 18th, we'll be in Boston for our kickoff. And believe it or not, we're not forgetting the most important state, and that is Rhode Island, where we'll have the last shall be first. And we will we have chosen different venues, and the venue for September 24th, of all places, will be in Newport, Rhode Island, at Salve Regina University, hosted by the distinguished premier president of the university there, and that is Kelly Armstrong, who happens to be on our board. We want to thank her. And then, needless to say, we have a big gala in October celebrating the centennial, and it'll be held at the Encore resort in Boston, really outside of Boston and Everett. And one of the reasons why we've chosen that area is there are only two venues in the city of Boston, two, that will hold 1,900 people. Anyone who has attended our dinner in the past, we've been averaging 1,700 to 1,800 people. So it's extraordinary, to say the least. So that is the reason why we're there. But they're also a very generous supporter of the New England Council. And we can't say enough about the support they've given us. They're honored to be able to host us. So hopefully many of you will participate in that. So, but today, all of my commercials are done. But why are we here? Today we're here to hear from, he's not the senior member, but boy, you've moved up quickly already. And we want to welcome back Representative Gabe, who is, as you know, just got elected in 2023, and he may be one of the newest faces, but I think he is already assuming a great deal of respect and clout by his colleagues. You know, somebody said earlier, you know, he's personable, he's so well-liked. Believe me when I say that, that's a wonderful quality to have in Congress, because an awful lot of people will help people who are very positive and have an engaging personality. So that is not something to be underestimated. So it's an important quality to have, to say the least. So many of you know his background. He was the Director of Public Engagement and Community Affairs for then Governor Gina Raimondo. More recently, he served as Special Assistant to the President and Deputy Director of the White House of Intergovernmental Affairs during the Biden administration. Needless to say, he made history as the first person of color elected to Congress from the Ocean State, where he won that special election in 2023 to fill the seat by a very good congressman himself, and that was David Cicilline. So with that, he's established himself as a leader, as I indicated earlier, on a wide array of important issues to not only his district, but to New England at large. In the 119th Congress, he serves as the vice-ranking member of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. But more importantly, we'll talk about that, he's a member of the Budget Committee and the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. So needless to say, I speak for all of the people who are here today. We're honored that he could take time to join us during these challenging times, to say the least, in our nation's history, to give us an update on some of the key issues he is working on in the United States Congress. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to the Honorable Gabe Amo.
Thank you for that warm introduction. And, you know, I'm still getting used to being introduced to things. I wanted to cut you off a few times.
Cut me off? You're out of order. Cut me off.
And happy 100 years to the New England Council. And after the last 30 days, I too am 100 years old.
Yeah. Wow. Well, with that, I have a few questions, and it gives you an opportunity to think of your question that maybe not asked here today. So let me just begin by just saying that the Republicans are now in both the House and the Senate have taken the first step on the budget reconciliation. And how do you see this playing out with the president now saying that he wants one big, beautiful bill?
Beauty truly is in the eye of the beholder. But let's zoom out and talk about this process, because I do think the media has a tough time explaining it. I actually did a video sort of with a parody of Schoolhouse Rock to try to explain this, but it is a confusing process. So the Republicans have decided in the House, in somewhat agreement with the Senate, that the vehicle for their big policy changes will come through reconciliation. Reconciliation, in short, is a way to pass something without needing to overcome the filibuster. It can pass with a simple majority in the Senate. Now, we don't have those rules in the House, but this is what happens in the Senate. And essentially, they have decided that their top priorities, as articulated over the campaign trail and the consensus they've developed, will be the extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, TCJA, that I would say disproportionately, and you can find the numbers here, favor the wealthy. The top 1% gets about $1 trillion of benefits. They are seeking, at minimum, a floor of $4.5 trillion in cuts, in tax cuts. Now, the other priority they've focused on is vaguely describing border security. Not sure what that looks like. As you remember, there was a bill that was not a successful bipartisan attempt in the Senate last year that was effectively killed by the current president. He didn't want President Biden to have a win. And then vaguely they've described energy policy and energy independence, which is, my opinion, a commitment in doubling down to extraction. We don't actually know what that piece looks like. So what's happened in the first step is both the budget committees in the House and Senate are passing resolutions that will essentially give instructions to committees to fill in the details. So the budget committee just sort of sets the frame, and the committees of jurisdiction will fill in the details. So on the House side, they have given instructions on how much they want to increase or reduce the deficit. That's essentially how much they want to spend and how much they want to cut in various buckets. They have given instructions after a 12-hour marathon hearing last Thursday. It was a really long day. They have given the instructions to seek to raise the deficit in the area of the Ways and Means Committee, so that's tax policy, by $4.5 trillion. So they're increasing the deficit by that number over 10 years. At the same time, the instructions they've given to other committees have been to cut. So when we talk about those cuts, they're in the jurisdictions of energy and commerce. Hint, healthcare. That's the biggest bucket in energy and commerce. Medicare, Medicaid, in particular, the ACA. Then they've given instructions to the Agriculture Committee to cut hundreds of $millions. Think SNAP. That's really the biggest bucket there. But what is unusual about this process is it doesn't say specifically what line items you're cutting. That's up to the committees, and that's the work that's going to happen over the next few weeks. So the next step is next week. The House Republicans are going to put the budget resolution on the floor. So you'll see me on C-SPAN yelling a lot about the aspirations of cuts that don't quite exist yet, but you can deduce where they come from because there are only a few places that you can cut money from, and it's these critical programs. Now, at the same time, which is what Jim alludes to when he talks about one beautiful big bill that the president describes, is in the Senate, they've passed their own resolution separately that only focuses on border security. And it may have energy in there too. But in either case, the president killed it. He said, no, I want the House version. And now you've seen this pattern over the last few weeks is my friends in the legislative branch, the Article 1 branch of the Constitution, have said, whatever the Article 2 branch wants to do, the president, we're going to follow that. This is still a point of tension because the Senate mouse and the House mouse don't necessarily agree on the path forward. And so this will play out over the next few days. And so, I spoke to, if many of you might have heard this on the radio, that there was a guy who was angry at me and said, "You're lying," when I referred to cuts to Medicare and Medicaid to the ACA. And I said to him, "Sir, if you know anything about me, I like to deliver good news. I'm a pretty good-natured person. And to see me complain about something that happened in Washington means it's probably pretty serious. And I don't want to scare people. In fact, I would prefer to come back here in a few months and say nothing happened. That means we probably did our work in communicating with the public and enlisted some public shame. But it is very clear that the only way to achieve the savings described is by making cuts in those areas. And that, in Rhode Island, Medicaid, $2.17 billion. That's a significant part of our state's budget. That affects everything from the 40% of kids to pregnant women to our seniors to the ACA population because we expanded Medicaid. So it's a huge problem for us here in Rhode Island, problem throughout New England. But if you look at the fundamentals of our budget, people should be very, very concerned if these cuts move forward. Similarly, when you talk about cutting the ag budget, talking about school meals, hungry kids. Empty bellies mean you ain't filling your brain. That's a problem. This is about values. And I am not an alarmist. So that's where we are. Now, what do I think is going to happen? I believe that you're going to hear some of my colleagues spend some time with their constituents this week at home. And my colleagues on the other side, and they're going to hear, and you see this in the articles, unnamed Republican lawmaker. Some of them have let their names fly and say, I don't know if I want to cut that. Wait, which population? And we saw this with the president's illegal funding freeze that our great Attorney General Peter Nerona led on, and that Judge Jack McConnell here led on in making sure that the president couldn't arbitrarily take away power from the Article 1 guys, the legislature, us, in deciding to not spend dollars so that we've already decided on. So you saw that they're testing limits. That's part of what's happening, but there are, I believe, bad intentions behind some of this stuff to destabilize the administrative state, to make things break. When you fire hundreds of thousands of people, things aren't going to work. And then you can prove your theory, see, government's bad. So when I think my colleagues will go home and experience some of this. If you have institutions of higher education and they're talking about potential layoffs and you're talking about deciding that the letters of DEI, which I don't use, I say diversity, equity, and inclusion, because when you use letters, you don't talk about their meaning. When you make those arbitrary decisions that hurt people, that hurt the economic livelihood of communities, that should have an impact. So I don't believe my friends on the other side of the aisle are soulless. I think they're going to feel this. And I think they may come back and nudge their leaders and say, well, these tax cuts are a great thing, but what can we save? And then the math won't work out. Or you'll create the math that you want, right? This $4.5 trillion in tax cuts aspirations projects economic growth that would then reduce the deficit impact. That the math doesn't work out. So we'll see what happens, but I think it's going to be an intense spring. The cherry blossoms won't be the only things sprouting in Washington this summer. A lot of discontent, a lot of frustration. And I will say, if you have any national advocacy groups, this is not the time to be quiet. Because, again, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I would love to talk about all the investments we're making in our people and our places. But that can only happen if we avert the crises that are driven by real numbers, but the real people behind those numbers. I know that was long, I'm sorry, but I have a lot of feelings.
So upbeat and encouraging to hear. Wow. So are you predicting that when the big, beautiful one bill comes out of the House, people should get ready to see some severe cuts in Medicaid?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is devastating only because we know so many hospitals throughout New England in rural areas that rely on Medicaid funding. So if they are substantially cut.
And don't forget nursing homes.
Well, that's the other one,
right?
nursing homes.
You're right, because remember, Medicaid, poor folks. Right. So the blend of Medicare and Medicaid, we've already experienced great crisis here in Rhode Island. Try to get somebody in a nursing home right now. I get calls to my office about this all the time. So it is a problem, but we can avert it. That's the thing. So I re-up that call to action. We need, especially in those red states. That's what happened with the funding freeze. Those Republican governors said, "Wait, I'm affected too," and they called the White House and said, "Maybe you should not do this." And then they changed it from a memo to an FAQ to a tweet from the press secretary. A lot of chaos and confusion. I've worked in 2 White Houses. This is not normal.
Yeah. Well, you already are seeing a couple of Republican senators calling the White House saying, the cuts that you want to make on NIH, whether we're here in Alabama, that the Senator Britt has already indicated that would be drastic.
Yeah. Katie Britt, a one-time constituent of the 1st Congressional District. Her husband, Wesley, was on the Pats.
Oh, okay.
University of Alabama. So we have that tie. But she says that University of Alabama, Birmingham is a top-tier research institution in a red state. And I led a letter last week with 150 plus of my colleagues talking about those indirect cost cuts to really, question what do we mean about America first? There's nothing that is more the antithesis of that is any regression on our innovation economy. Look at what's happening at Brown University. I know we got a lot of Brown University folks here, and you're on my mind because I'm thinking about the great meeting I had with the Alzheimer's Association, and I think about the work that is happening on brain science, on remedies, on pathways to cures. That will get cut off because you can't run a lab, you can't hire personnel, you can't have graduate assistants, there's so many problems, and we are in a moment where we need to innovate more. I'm on the science committee as well. And I think about this from the perspective of what sort of future are we going to have? Is this the end of our progress? Or do we want to double down on America being an exceptional place where we not only have great talent, but we have great outcomes? These are real existential questions that are being posed by this moment.
Congress faces a deadline of March 14th to finish the 2025 funding. Has there been any progress to report on that?
Man, I'm just full of good news today. Yeah. Well, so like these things are running in parallel, but they sort of overlap. I would actually call them 3 streams. There's the channel 1 is the chaos channel. It's the EO a day channel. It's fire, fury, intensity. And look, I think the president learned from his experience of of his first term that you really have 18 months to effectuate an agenda. And he said, well, I'm going to shrink this, and if I throw a lot of things at them, they may miss some. So and there are so many things that aren't being reported on, right? So that's one lane. The second lane is what we just talked about for a few minutes in terms of reconciliation. Then there's this third that's right in front of us, March 14th, because of our inability to get a full year funding package. For fiscal year 25, we're nearly 6 months in to pay for the whole year. Kind of crazy. Couldn't run a business like that. Now, we did have an agreement. I remember in December, and then there were some tweets or X posts or whatever they call saying "kill it" from the co-president. And I say that because this is not political rhetoric. I sort of wonder how J.D. Vance feels about it all, because you have our president really highly deferential to the richest man in the world about these consequential decisions that are affecting all of us. And so when we had that deal for a full year, we didn't get that. We were on another continuing resolution, which means that we are locked into what we were spending for fiscal year 24. So for fiscal 25, we've got this in front of us to take care of all the things. I think about all the community projects, all the earmarks from groups. I was just with some town officials yesterday. He said, when are we getting this thing? You said it would come. I said, we haven't paid the bill. And so we can't get that funding to you. And so what is important to remember is that my Republican colleagues have the numbers to get this done on their own if they want to. They're in the majority. If they want to compromise and reassert their role in leading our country by not merely abdicating to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and saying, look, we got a big, beautiful building on our side of Pennsylvania Avenue at the Capitol. We're going to rein in the wholesale termination of people at NOAA, at NIH, at the FDA with this bird flu, IRS. That's why file your taxes early. There might not be somebody to help you. Seriously. I just got my return back this morning. I think they have to reassert. And so we are hearing that they're sort of at an impasse right now. Susan Collins said this yesterday. I spoke with our leadership last night. They said that it's difficult to see a path right now for March 14th. March 14th is coming up. But I will be very clear. My Republican colleagues have the majority, so it is on them about how we move forward. If they need our votes, Democratic votes, then like any other process, they need to give us something for it. And it's got to be substantial.
So putting a percentage of a government shutdown on March 14th.
Look, I believe the deadlines make people do work. So I would put it at 25% likelihood of happening. Mm-hmm. But again, are my colleagues on the other side of the aisle going to stand up and make a deal? Let's make a deal.
Right. Speaking of deals, what's the update on Hasbro?
I might be the wrong person to talk to about that one, too. Well, look, I will tell you in my own engagement, I've spoken with the CEO a couple times, and I made a personal appeal. As a kid from Pawtucket, and the pride that I would take when I would buy my WWF action figure and see that it was made from Hasbro in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, it was a big point of pride. And I said that to him. A lot of the words that we've heard from them have been about talent. I think talent wants to be in the great state of Rhode Island, all respect to Massachusetts. Cheaper, more convenient to get around, the food's better. So, I do understand the allure of, going up 128. I get it. But I do think we are special here. Think about all the great institutions of higher education they could be recruiting from here. And the folks up in Boston want to be down here too. I think about all my high school classmates who are, this is my 20th reunion year from high school. And I think about all the folks who want to be back in Rhode Island, are trying hard to move their families back here. Either, the folks in the medical field trying to, do their work here. The folks in New York knowing that, that's not the most fun place to be right now either, want to be back here to raise their families, to build a life. And so the arguments I've made is that people want to be here too. So I will continue to join the efforts. We have great leaders who are making that case. I see Liz Tanner here who is focused. But here's the thing, Rhode Island is not built its future, cannot build its future on just one company. The success of so many in this room are part of it. So I say, look, if we're not good enough, we're going to find other people too. But I do want them to be here because this is a special place. And I know that the state is working as hard as possible. They've called in the delegation to help. And, we're all in this together. That's the thing about Rhode Island you're not going to get everywhere else. Like, it takes one phone call to get the right person. That right person might be in front of you, like Liz Tanner. But
you mentioned earmarks earlier. Is earmarks going to stay in the 25 budget as well as the 26?
So for the 25, we believe they will. It would be odd to shift midstream. Now, 26 will be interesting. Remember, they removed earmarks, President Obama, and congressional leaders, but that was in large part after a scandal. And so I don't necessarily see my Republican colleagues who are going to have to, if things stay on this course, make their constituents swallow a bitter pill vis-a-vis, mandatory spending and entitlements. If that happens, them not try to get and keep earmarks. But it really is on the table. The claims of greater efficiency being found by Doge, a lot of them aren't true. They put up a website, if you listen to NPR this morning, put up a website claiming, tens of billions with spreadsheets and wrong information and all sorts of nonsense to justify the internet trolls that don't necessarily have the knowledge of the inner workings of these agencies. This is not amateur stuff. And my hope is that this pursuit of efficiency is authentic. I want to root out waste, fraud, and abuse like everybody else. Your tax dollars, our tax dollars, are very precious things. People are working harder than ever, and they're not feeling like they're getting ahead. I completely understand that, and you don't want to feel like you're playing by the rules and others aren't. And that's what people feel about government. Look, there is a perception that the status quo is not serving me, so why should I be for it? And I get that. But at the same time, some 19-year-old coder is not the person I want deciding the future of Social Security payments. It's just not how it should be. And so when I look at the conversation on earmarks, and to bring it back, is there are so many good things that we're able to fund through those. And I hope that my folks see the light on keeping them in place.
Seeing at Doge what they're doing, I mean, we got 100,000 people already been terminated. Another 75,000 have taken the retirement. What's the response from the Democrats on this?
Yeah, look, it's multifaceted. I get a lot of, where's the plan? I get that. It's reasonable. But it's not going to be some Madison Avenue, well-packaged, fits into a box slogan on how we respond to this. It's not, because they're bringing forth chaos. We may have to respond in a lot of different ways. And now, do I think we have solved for how to respond? Not necessarily, and it's difficult because of the numbers. But we are not powerless. We are powerful, and we have to think about ways to demonstrate that. There's agitation, right? I've spoken in front of 4 different cabinet agencies. I'm in front of more microphones than I ever have wanted to be. But to make the case alongside my colleagues. And hopefully that breaks through in some communities, in front of the CFPB and the USAID and the Treasury Department and NOAA. to say that it's very important that we don't proceed along these lines of chaos and confusion. So agitation. The second, legislation. We have to be proactive with bills, even if they won't pass. But you have to be for something, right? And it's very important that we articulate that in the vehicle that we have as lawmakers, which is to try to get 3 Republicans. That's all we need. We just need 3 to see the light. And so I am on multiple bills. One of great importance is the Taxpayer Protection Act, talking about how we limit the access to these important databases at the Treasury Department. All of our information. We want to give it to a person who literally buys and sells information for a living? Doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's one. We certainly need to look at the conflicts of interest here. You know, how does somebody with $20 billion in federal contracts that we know of get to make decisions about the whole of government and does not have to disclose anything? As a special government employee, this is a status that you can have for 130 days. You don't have to do the normal financial disclosures. You can still find my financial disclosures from the White House. They weren't very impressive. But every year, I had to put those up online. And then the third is the litigation, right? And that, I will tell you, we were far more prepared than people know with regards to legislation. They are pulling some new tricks, but there are groups that were able to file lawsuits on day one of the administration. Our attorneys general were able to file lawsuits very early because, you know, the thing about the president and his team is, even though they said Project 2025, not us, never believe them. I just don't know why we fall for this over and over again. He said, we have nothing to do with that. No, it's literally the playbook for everything they're doing right now. And that's not, you know, I struggle with this with my friends in the press because this stuff is happening right in front of us. And they're telling us what they're doing, and they mean what they say. And I was having this conversation yesterday with someone saying, you know, he literally said, I'm not going to touch Medicaid. I said, why would you fall for that? He also said that grocery prices will be down on day one. And so this culture of mistruths and being comfortable with being deceived is tough for me to wrestle with. But that is what we're battling. So when you talk about what are Democrats doing, there are multiple realities here. Some of America is not, and arguably most of America is not feeling this. So they're seeing the news at 6:30, the NBC Nightly News, and they're saying, well, I don't know, I'm not affected by this. So I think the Democrats are just making noise. So that's part of the mission, too, is to speak truth, reveal truths, and make sure that there is one truth. And we live in a culture right now where there are multiple. It's a very multiple choice answer society that we live in. And the last thing I'll say, what Democrats have to do, and that we are doing, is focusing on our Republican colleagues who are uncomfortable with the moment and just need a little encouragement. And so I know a lot of them probably saw the 36-hour news cycle of Trump and Zelensky back and forth and said, I'm uncomfortable with our president calling Zelensky a dictator. That was a red line for a lot of people. That was, you know, it isn't just appeasement. It's a switching sides to fundamental values we believe in about the rule of law and the ability for our norms to transcend, you know, the situations that we experience in this world, right? There's got to be some consistency to the things that we believe in. And so the last piece there is working on my Republican colleagues.
You know, a report came out just, I believe, yesterday that said that Providence is the least affordable marketing area of all the metro areas of the United States. Your thoughts on what you and your colleagues can do about more affordable housing?
Look, housing is a driver of costs locally. You know, one of the bills that I'm leading this Congress, me in the House and Adam Schiff in the Senate, I think he'll put it in again, I hope he does, is a bill around conversion of government buildings and trying to fund and provide some seed money for communities that have, you know, whether state or local owned buildings, convert them into housing. Obviously, the core of it for us here is on the supply side. You know, thanks to the leadership of our General Assembly, of our governor, they're spending a lot of money, and it's starting to move. But it takes a long time. Now, it takes longer than it should and throughout this country, and it takes longer than it should here in Rhode Island. And so speeding up the regulatory processes, obviously, the local aspect of this is challenging. You know, communities should drive their future. But at the same time, there's a shared interest in having people have homes. And we've got to have balance in those values. And our friends up the road in Massachusetts are moving pretty fast, too. So as we break down the barriers, we can maintain the same cultural, identities that we have. We can, you hear folks, very concerned about there's more kids in the schools. What are we going to do with more kids in the schools? That's good. We should grow. Our future is in growth. If we stay still, we will not experience the benefits of, all of the things that we do well, because we're going to have to shrink. We have to expand in so many ways. And I think, my colleagues throughout government across the country, at the state, local, federal level, everybody's going to be grappling with housing in one way or another. And I actually think that it might be an area for bipartisan collaboration. Things like the low-income housing tax credit, things like historic tax preservation tax credits, things that are about building things in America, right? We saw that come through on the bipartisan infrastructure law. Republicans and Democrats got together. I think we have to have an equivalent commitment to housing in this country. And, here in Rhode Island, we'll benefit from those big national efforts, but at the end of the day, it's really going to come down to what we do in our communities locally. And look, that's going to require work. And we're going to have to persuade, at the council level, persuade with planning boards, spend time with people to extol the virtues of housing growth. But, you've seen the headlines here recently, right? Nobody wants affordable. That word sometimes gets thrown around to mean, we don't want other. And I truly believe this is about values. And that's where I spend my time appealing on this issue. And we all have more work to do on that.
Rhode Island has a very ambitious renewable energy goal. Mm-hmm. I believe the first state to have a offshore wind farm. And the administration is now going in a different direction. They have prioritized fossil fuel development. So what do you say to the renewable energy folks here in Rhode Island?
Look, we still have to lock in. We don't necessarily know where all of the changes in the regulatory landscape might land. I've talked to the companies. A lot of them are still trying to figure out. They're, having some challenges as it relates to, the capital required to execute some of these projects. If you, roll back on the Inflation Reduction Act, if you, have investors pull out going to have real consequences. But, 4 years is not forever. And even two, I mean, I do think it's going, the president can't wholesale undo, everything that's out there now. Congress still has a role, and we'll continue to advocate in that regard. But I will say it's not going to be easy. And as you know, I've spent a lot of time talking with folks in the industry over the last few weeks who are reasonably concerned. But we have a long-term clean energy future. It just may have a slight detour. But I remain optimistic and committed, and especially if we have to appeal on some other parts of this, especially on the jobs front. These are good paying jobs at a time where there is greater uncertainty for people's livelihoods. We certainly are experiencing the impacts of climate change. We know that having an extraction-based economy it might help in the short term, but it's not going to solve our long-term issues. So, again, this is one of the harder areas because the federal investments have made up such a large portion of what we have been able to do, and so I'm going to stay at it. And I think the whole of our delegation is there, and I know our colleagues in the region will certainly stay there. But it's going to be hard.
In December, the inflation was at 2.9, and in January is 3%. There are some people concerned about the rate that it's going on the ascent, on the incline. What really is concerning them is tariffs, that this could really increase the rate of inflation. Your thoughts on tariffs? We had discussions earlier about 25% increase in tariffs and any imports from Canada and 25% from Mexico. He put a pause on that for a month, the administration, but there is a 10% increase in the tariff from China. Your thoughts on just tariffs in particular, those two countries that major trading partners for us?
Well, look, I think this is one of these closely held ideological beliefs of the president that he does not have wide support on. The problem is the president does have a lot of executive power that Congress can't necessarily impact with regards to tariffs. Now, the other challenge here is that business needs predictability, right? And so you're going to have people price this in early because they can, and you don't want to be behind the curve as it relates to the increase in costs that you're going to experience. And so talk about inflation being an issue. We talked about it all throughout the fall campaign. Inflation, inflation, inflation. You've seen what presidents who have experienced inflation have experienced at the ballot box. Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush. You've seen that have an impact. Yet we are literally driving this economy to higher costs by being focused on propping up trade wars all over the place. And so I think that I'm hoping the very wealthy people who have the president's ear, the folks he said are rich and that he's going to make richer, are talking to him about this and slowing him down. But we will see between tariffs, I anticipate a weaker regulatory regime as it relates to all of the corporate consolidation and ability to really price gouge, to dictate the terms. You're not going to see as much enforcement. They sort of are already acting with that. And then when you look at drivers of inflation like food, when you fire a bunch of people from the FDA when we have an avian flu, those egg prices aren't going down anytime soon, folks. They're only going up. They are. And actually, I was just reading something this morning that suggests maybe the curve could bend in November. So, you might have to go down to a 2-egg omelet instead of the 3. But that's where we are. That's where we are. And so, again, this is not the most uplifting conversation. But that's the reality that we're facing, is that the ideological desire to enforce tariffs with the illusion of the increase in domestic activity, right? You can't just turn up steel production. That's not a dial that you turn domestically. You can't just, I was talking with somebody about lumber earlier. That's not just a dial that you turn immediately. And the president said people are going to feel some pain. That's not the greatest campaign slogan, but that's where we are. That's where we are. And I'm hoping that it slows some, but our trading partners are going to respond in kind because they have to.
Maybe one question from the audience, only because we're running late. How could I say no? Go ahead.
So hopefully, Senator Todd Young has been focused. He was one of the original architects of the Chips and Science Act, which your former boss was a big proponent of. It's a huge thing for the United States. It's a huge thing for the economy. Is there a world where you can work across the aisle and all of you can come together on something like that? Because if we could get technology, possibly you could somehow slide it all the other things that you're trying to do underneath that.
Yeah, it's a good question on Chips and Science. So folks who aren't tracking the Chips and Science Act, a real big piece of industrial policy led by our great former Secretary Gina Raimondo to, one, protect us on a national security front, right? If, God forbid, China, ever proceeded with war against Taiwan, that would be pretty problematic, and that is, they've got aspirations of reunification, but that would also be devastating to our economy with regards to semiconductor manufacturing, a chunk of which happens over there. I can't remember the percentage off the top of my head, but that's a really important piece of legislation. It created a boatload of incentives for our bigger companies to, build these massive fabs, these factories to produce chips domestically, reducing our dependence on others to make those chips, because they're everywhere. The size smaller than your pinky, your phones, your refrigerators, your cars, everything. Look, it would be a great opportunity for bipartisanship. I think we do need a CHIPS 2.0 probably to continue the growth. We haven't necessarily funded all of the science parts of the CHIPS Act. That was to fuel our national labs, a lot of innovation that takes place there. But yeah, I just think we might have some bigger fish to fry. Todd Young is one Republican, and that obviously had overwhelming Democratic support. So if they were up for it, sure. But I don't think that's in this climate of deep cuts to things. I don't know if they would embrace more CHIPS Act right now. So.
We're told that he's on a tight schedule, so he's going to have to leave this conversation. He's going to meet with the Rising Stars right after this breakfast, but he also has just a couple minutes to do photos, so you may have an opportunity to ask a quick question of him while you're in line. But I just want to thank the Congressman. I want to thank this overflowing crowd here today for your attention, too. So thank you.
Thank you.